What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about WWDC 2020, and we are going to go over my favorite things that were discussed during the keynote. So let's go. Alright, so the first thing that I'm going to discuss is the widgets. Apple finally introduced widgets into the home screen or to regular screens instead of just having them in that widget screen that we had them after iOS 13. On iOS 14, you can now put widgets all over your home screen and you can resize them, which is pretty cool. They also introduced this thing called a smart stack, which has different widgets on them. You can place this thing, for example, at the top of your home screen, and it'll have different widgets that you can scroll through. And one thing that it can do is, depending on your behavior and what apps you use throughout the day, it'll display different widgets so that you can see what you usually do throughout the day at that specific time, which is a pretty cool feature. The other thing that they did is they introduced something called the app library, which is sort of like folders in a way, but a little different because it auto categorizes these things for you. And it's a screen that you can get to by scrolling all the way to the right. One cool thing that you can do is, now that you have this app library, if you're editing the home screen, you can now hide screens. So if you have like 8 screens or so and you have to flip through a ton of pages to get to certain apps, you can now hide those so that, let's say your second screen is actually your app library, so that you can access your apps a lot quicker instead of scrolling to 1,000 pages. Another thing that Apple added was picture-in-picture, and it's about damn time. This is a feature that Android users have enjoyed for a very long time, and it's good to finally have it on iOS. So now if you're watching a video and you need to do something else, this is something that you can actually move around on the screen and actually resize so that you can use it however you want with whatever other app you're actually using. Now, to stay on that topic, to something that's actually relevant, Apple also introduced less intrusive UI for FaceTime, for receiving phone calls, as well as Siri. And this is a much welcome feature or design change that Apple introduced, because if you've ever been using your phone and you got, let's say, a FaceTime phone call, you would be abruptly interrupted with whatever you were doing. And if you were trying to use Siri, it would take up the whole screen also, and you couldn't do anything else at the same time. So this is something that is quite useful, and it's great UI with regards to what we previously had, which was terrible because it was blocking everything that you were trying to do, especially if you were trying to receive a call or anything like that. That was not good UI, and it's actually nice for them to actually update this to have better UI and less interruptions. Now let's talk about the Messages app, because this is probably my favorite change that Apple made here with some of the things that they introduced. One of the features that they introduced was the ability to pin conversations so that you can prioritize your conversations, and if you have any conversations that you want to keep at the top so that you can always reference them quickly, well, now you can by pinning them to the top. This is a really neat feature that I'm not sure if Android has, but it's pretty cool, and I'm really happy that we're getting it, because there are conversations where I would like to have pinned that sometimes after a couple of days of talking to someone, I want to refer back to that conversation to talk to somebody, and I have to go searching for them. Now I don't have to do that no more. So that's a pretty cool feature to have. The other thing that was added to Messages is the ability to actually add photos to group conversations. So when you're talking to people, they can have their profile images, etc. So you know who you're talking to. Now, with group conversations, you'll be able to add a photo so that you can keep track of that. And a cool feature, even more on top of that, is that within that photo, whoever is the most active person currently in that chat will show up around the bubble near the outside of the icon or image so that you can see who's been the most active or who's the last person to reply. And speaking of active, we've all been in some of those group chats that are very annoying, that get 1,000 messages a second. And, you know, it's really hard to scroll through because there's so many things going on. Well, Apple just added inline replies so that you can have sub conversations or like a sub thread, so that you can minimize these sub conversations so that they don't take up all the space and you don't have to scroll a million times to find whatever you need to find. And the last feature that I really love is that they added mentions, specifically with regard to this topic that I just mentioned about having these chats that are very active. There are people who want to turn off these chats and don't want to be bothered, but now you can do that and actually have mentions turned on so that it can only notify you whenever you have been mentioned in the chat. Now let's talk about iPadOS. There's not much to talk about here, but one new feature that they added is the ability to use pen to write in inputs and actually get results back. So if you're using like a search engine and you type something in there or you scribble something in there with the pen, it will now turn that into actual text and you'll be able to search for things. The other thing that's pretty cool is, let's say you're in your notes app and you're scribbling and you're taking notes and you write down a phone number. You will now be able to make a phone call from that scribbled phone number that you wrote, or if you write down an address, it'll redirect you to maps so that you can get directions for that address. That's a really cool feature to have and things that make your daily life a lot easier, and that should be the goal of software. So I'm pretty happy with those features that were added. On top of that, a lot of the features that were added for iOS are also now available on iPadOS, and iPadOS actually had some of these features before iOS had. So there you have it. Now let's move on to Airpot, because two new features that were introduced are pretty neat. One of them is the ability for AirPods now to recognize the different devices that you have and auto connect to them. So if you have an iPad, a phone, and a MacBook, and you move throughout the house and you're near one of those different devices, it will disconnect from one of the devices that you were on previously and connect to the new device that you're near. So if you switch from your phone to your tablet, it'll be a smooth transition where it'll automatically connect. And that's a pretty cool feature also, which saves you time. And again, these are the things that software should do, make your life easier. So that's pretty awesome. Now lastly, let's talk about Mac, because some huge changes were made, and this was the biggest announcement of the keynote, where Apple is finally going to move to their ARM processors, or what they called Apple Silicon. We all know that Apple uses Intel for most of their hardware, except for the Apple Watch and the iPhone and the iPad, but for most of their computers, they still are using Intel, which leads to a lot of issues. One is that you have to wait for Intel to release the proper chips for you to use them on the computer, which can lead to delays, which has led to a lot of unhappy customers in the past because we've wanted updates quicker with faster performance, and Apple has not been able to provide the performance and updates on time that we have demanded from them. So moving to their own processors or their own Apple Silicon will alleviate a lot of this. It will also unleash performance that we have probably never seen from our Mac computers or our iMacs, etc., because now they could have that harmony that they have on other devices, where it's hardware and software in great harmony, which leads to the best performance that you can have. As a developer and someone who actually has an app on the App Store, another thing that will affect me is the changes that are coming. What this allows for is applications to work across the different operating systems, so iOS, iPadOS, as well as macOS. The goal is to have apps that seamlessly can be used on all the different operating systems that Apple currently has. And who knows, maybe at some point they're just going to have one OS and everything works on that same OS, and you're just going to have like responsive screens that behave differently based on the size of your screen. Alright guys, that is the updates that I have for you today. Since I am a developer, as I mentioned before, I actually just downloaded iOS 14 and I'm going to be playing with that on my iPhone. So please let me know in the comments below if you want me to make a video on that. I will very likely create a video regardless, but let me know if that's something that you guys want to see. I will take some time to go over these features and try them out, and then I'm probably going to screen record whatever I'm doing on the phone and talk about it here in one of the videos. And that's basically it. If you are new to the channel and you found value in this video, please consider subscribing, hitting the like button, sharing the video, and hitting the notification bell so that you're notified when I create new videos. If you are not new and you do not have notifications turned on, please go ahead and turn that on so that you're also notified. That's basically this video, guys. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.